This episode contains mature language and situations. Listener discretion is advised. Hi, I'm Jason, creator of The Grey Rooms. Welcome to the third bonus episode of our off-season. The episode you are about to hear originally aired on Patreon back in March, as just one of the perks our patrons receive throughout the season for supporting the show. Now, speaking of the bonus content our patrons receive, this fall we'll be having a special week-long event that only patrons will have access to. And trust me, we went into the depths of hell for this one. But more on that later. And if you'd like to join us for this week-long event or find out more about our patron content and all of the fun bonuses they receive, wander on over to patreon.com/thegrayrooms and find a tier that's right for you. Now, on to the episode. You wake, standing on the doorstep of a beautiful mansion. The front door stands open. You can hear voices, music, so many, many people. You step towards the door. You have to know what's inside. You're lost. You have no memory of how you got here. It doesn't matter. Because now, you belong to The Grey Rooms. Patreon bonus, The Initiate.
Faint was the sound of the river beneath her steps as she descended the circular stairway from the lowest levels of the manor. Transcribing an orbit around the weight-bearing plinth which anchored the stair, she knew in the uncanny depths of her mind the exact dimensions of the space she traversed. 157 meters, 873 steps. It had been only the vaguest notion when the plans for the manor were first drawn up. Like an image seen in the smoke of a back-alley opium den, an unnameable compulsion told her to drive this descent deep into the bedrock upon which the manor lay. In the depths, the shaft had ended in a rune-inscribed capstone. Accursed sigils drawn from her most loathsome tomes had sealed shut this passage and acted as an anchor for future magics. Magics which had since been rigorously studied, transcribed, inscribed, and enacted. For now, today, the capstone was no more. Thanks to the careful and considered spellwork of her pupil, Alma Agatha, the Cyclopean plug now sat beneath the rushing black waters and obsidian fog of a river, a terrible, inexorable channel of swirling water that now coursed through the very heart of the project. The architect, Baroness of Hell, trusted manager of the Grey Rooms and project leader for Ash Manor, alighted upon the creaking wooden timbers of a narrow dock that sat athwart the river's current. She crossed that narrow span to stand beside that aforementioned pupil. Alma held aloft a torch to hold back the dark and unknowable night that perpetually haunted this vast array of subterranean caverns. The elder demon politely thanked her apprentice for her excellent work, and in response the younger veteran of the alienists' lodge smiled with pride and appreciation. Without a further word between them, Alma raised a great curved horn to her lips. A relic. It was carved from the head of a massive three-headed land beast when mortal realms were young and few and close between. In response, a flat-bottomed skiff hewed into view. It moved slowly, pulled by a being so blasphemously old that it made the two powerful rune-crafters seem as newly sprouted shoots poking from the earth in springtime by comparison. He wore a long, filthy cloak and cowl, which completely obscured his features. His gnarled ancient limbs drove the craft with an unrelenting strength that was unnatural to behold. The only bit of his countenance they saw was a pair of glimmering orbs staring back at them from the dim shadows of the hood, a shining pair of ancient coins, which served the ferryman as eyes. His name was Haros. Since long before either demon had drawn breath, the ferryman had escorted those that could pay his fee up and down the lengths of the accursed rivers of hell. The Styx, the Acheron, the Phlegethon, the Cocytus, and the dismal tributary here beneath the manor, the Letha. Nodding in respect to her elder, Alma stepped back from the end of the dock as the miasma-shrouded barge slid to a halt, and the ferryman gestured with an outstretched arm. Not a word passed her lips as the architect stepped aboard, moving to the front to drop a clinking sack full of tribute into a cracked and stained terracotta bowl. The ferryman's pole sunk into thick, languid muck at the bottom of the abyssal river, and the creaking barge set off downstream. The powerful demoness did not look back. As she sat, a thin statue in crimson and black atop the bowed and ancient boards, she contemplated the visitor she was to meet. While many plans for this Stygian flow swirled within her mind, today it would serve as a means of conveyance for both herself and her outer worldly contact. The creation of the Grey Rooms had only been possible through the most unusual confluence of interests. The founder, head of project management, had brought together investors from the most powerful and influential realms still floating in the vast ether that made up the known universe. Together, the pooled resources of the Hells, the Host, the Grove, and the Far had transformed this small pocket of the founder's domain into the potent soul trap they oversaw today. But not all realms sit equal amongst the ether, and thus the problem was ever manifest: how to stay in contact with the indescribable and alien beings of the Far. As she sat atop the ancient craft, gliding across these tenebrous waters, she contemplated the vast and unknowable being said to drift in an ocean of souls at the edge of existence. They were called the Far for a reason, after all. The members of the board had shifted and changed over the many years the project had been running, in every seat save one. The accursed horrors from the far ends of reality had only ever sent one emissary, the creature she knew simply as Zivix. A bank of bilious fog parted, and she saw it standing there atop the shoreline of a forgotten and damned continent that drifted endlessly within the expanse of the Letha. It was early to every meeting, every time. Her guide slid the boat to a stop alongside a rocky escarpment, allowing her to alight this tragic ground and ascend a set of treacherous, time-worn stairs. These stones had not felt the tread of a living being in centuries, and trembled beneath her feet to be known and felt and seen again. Haros stayed aboard, watching her progress with impassive, shimmering eyes. He would await her return and escort her back to that lonely and forlorn dock, should her mind and sanity survive this brush with the ineffable and aberrant envoy from the Far. At the top of the stairs was an amphitheater, that had once overlooked beautiful azure waters and a stunning coral forest bursting with a vibrant, untroubled ecology. Now at the center of the arena was only the distorted, squirming, writhing form of Zivix. To describe it would be to describe the sensation of worms beneath the eyelids, the suction of parasites at the intestinal lining, the moist pumping of an exposed jugular vein as the last vitae of life begins to clot. Beings from the end of reality were not meant to have definable, knowable, biological forms. It wore this suit of flesh and sinew with all the comfort of a lay preacher laid upon the stained bedding of a whorehouse chaise. The architect strode with confidence across those ancient and crumbling bricks. She offered a formal greeting, for all it mattered. Of all the realms, the beings of the far cared least for these niceties, but it was within her nature to do things to her utmost and with exactitude. High standards. When the creature spoke, it did so in the groans of a dying man and the sounds of a cricket chirping. A raven's caw blended with the ear-splitting sound of a cat's disembowelment to form words that the demoness had been trained to understand. It was unpleasant, but with a faint smile upon her lips, she set to speaking with this, the chosen avatar of that indescribably powerful backer to the Grey Rooms. Speaking with Zivix, beyond the oral component, was always a lesson in pulling meaning from the intricacies of madness. It never just expressed one thought. Every sentence was 3 or 4 ideas all slithering and jockeying on top of each other to enter your mind. She managed to glean that yes, the Far were pleased with how the project had progressed this iteration. If it's possible for beings that slumber beyond the pale boundary to express appreciation and excitement, she felt sure they had both to spare. Then came an extended period whereby she had to once again explain that for she and the other contributors to the project, time passed as inexorably and swiftly as an arrow arcing across the heavens. It asked, in a number of aberrant and blasphemous ways, about the status of Samantha Winters, about Todd Mathis. She was sure, convinced, that when she said they were no longer direct participants in the project, that in fact they had no knowledge of where the damned heart of Miss Winters had gone, it did not understand her. But still, with an unending wave of cilia and eyeballs, the clacking of hooves and horns, their conversation went on through a deep and verdant forest of technical matters. Soul distribution, ongoing efforts to shore up the arcane firmament beneath the project, future plans for expansion and possible candidate selections. Without the river, it had been all but impossible to speak directly to the Far, except on rare occasions. And so Zivix was unrelenting with questions that ranged from the color of the table runner in the front dining hall to the thought that future participants should be screened for potential conflicts with the other realms on philosophical grounds. Its example of a pagan nature worshipper of some kind entering the rooms and causing the grove to raise a fuss was delivered on the back of a whale song that crescendoed into the orgiastic writhing of a seizure patient. Finally, the sound of its skin slithering against itself and the clack of talons quieted. Their discussion was at an end, to be continued at the board meeting that would happen in the not-too-distant future. It expressed deep appreciation for the river as a means of communication and the hopes that more frequent conversations might be possible with this mode of transit in place. The architect bowed to the creature and turned to take her leave. But as her heels clacked against the benighted soil, she could not help but glance back over her shoulder at the hideous being she called an ally. There was something in its manner, something about the way it moved. It had been so long since she'd spoken to the thing, she'd almost forgotten. And then, as she stepped onto the first tread of the stairway, down to the shore and the boat and the ferryman, she stopped. The snake. Never once, in all her imaginings, had she even considered it. In many ways, the Far were the ideal investors. They asked many questions, but gave no directives. Not once in the history of the program had they asked for anything beyond their appointed share of the soul harvest. Not once had they caused a fuss, as the Grove sometimes did with their objections to candidate backgrounds. Not once had they showed up unannounced, as the host so loved to do, as her sister so loved to do. So it had never entered her mind to think that the snake was their doing. But now she wasn't so sure. Something in the way that Zivix moved, something about the way it had constructed its thoughts with her. Was it possible for a being that barely understood coherent life to lie? The architect, Baroness of Hell and proud mother to Ash Manor, stepped aboard the ferryman's boat with a dour expression on her face. Her ride back to the dock was one of silent contemplation and increasing concern. She would need to test this theory, to verify. But if she was right, the very fabric of the project was at risk. And the project was everything. The project was her world. Her world within the Grey Rooms.
They walked in a row through the thick summer air, downward toward the other end of the quiet suburban block. Walt had waited for 2 hours past the start of the party, letting his neighbors get lubricated on cheap beer and wine. Their neighbors saw them coming and waved in their direction. Walt bunched up his brood and began an endless string of introductions. Himself, his wife Flossie, and their son Jamie. Inevitably, everyone he met would ask about the house. Walt had his parry well rehearsed.
Oh, it's not the house's fault the last occupant went crazy and killed himself. That Bronson guy had real problems. The house is old, but really nice. We have some great plans for it and got it for well under market.
An hour later, when he was finally able to break free, Walt grabbed a beer and surveyed the yard. Furthest away from the bar were the old-timers and retirees who'd overextended their stay and were now complaining about paying taxes to educate other people's children. 3 groups of men in their 30s and 40s clustered in easy refreshment range of the beer keg. The children circled in an asteroid belt beyond the listening range of their parents, hurtling back in only when hungry or hurt. The wives, there were no single women, fluttered from the food table to and out of loose groupings of other women and occasional men. As the evening went on, Walt sidled from one group of men to another, introducing himself. The third group of men huddled together more closely than usual guide distance, their conversation tightly knotted between them. Walt recognized Saul Greenberg, his real estate agent, as one of the men.
Hi, Saul.
Hi, Walt. Guys, this is Walt Napier. Just moved into the Bronson house. Glad you could make it.
The group opened up just enough to let him in.
Walt, this is Phil Oliver. He lives next door to you.
Hi, Walt.
And this is Bob Kwasny.
Hey, Walt.
Nice to meet you, Bob.
Don't be so sure about that. You haven't gotten to know him.
The group regurgitated banalities at each other for a few minutes before Saul turned to him.
Walt, the group of us get together every Sunday afternoon in Phil's garage to watch baseball or football. It's a serious man cave. Wet bar, heaters, and HD TV. Well, why don't you come by tomorrow around 1, unless you're tied up at church. It'll give us a chance to properly lie to each other.
I don't get to church much.
The men looked relieved.
Perfect, neither do we. You should fit right in.
Walt hesitated. He wasn't much for sports, but he was new to the neighborhood, after all.
Sure, why not?
After a few more group introductions, Walt rounded up Flossie and Jamie for the walk home. Back at the house, he poured himself a double, while blithely telling Flossie about his invitation to the man cave. She fretted and filled his ears with stories she'd heard all evening about the bad reputation the block had. Dark deeds, details of the suicide that had driven the price of their new home down, legends of a tyrannical landowner. Bad reputation or not, Walt didn't care. They lived in an honest-to-goodness mansion now. The Bronson house was a post-Civil War brick, square on the outside, but subdivided into 15 oddly shaped rooms on the inside. Flossie had hated it on first viewing, but Walt had worn her down. That's how things usually went in their home. The next afternoon, Walt showed up at the garage with 2 six-packs of beer. Philip met him at the door.
Hi, Walt. Thanks for the beer. But we drink this great brew that Bob concocted it. It has an interesting kick. Grab a seat.
5 easy chairs looped in loose horseshoe shape to face a large flat-screen television. An oriental area rug covered the floor between the chairs. Walt could feel the floor creaking under the rug as he walked across it. Wood flooring, he thought. Weird for a garage. The 2 windows had been shuttered on the outside and were covered by window shades on the inside. Phil noticed Walt noticing.
We keep things private here. The house rules if no one enters or leaves until it's over. That door in the corner is the privy. Did you bring your cell phone?
Yeah?
House rule is to turn off all devices. Could you do that now?
As Phil stared at him, Walt pulled out his phone. The other man watched as, sour with annoyance, Walt shut it down and stowed it by the door. Only then did Phil extend a hand holding the brew, which had been drawn from a large wooden keg. The other men trickled in as Walt sipped at Bob's brew. As they exchanged greetings, Walt had to admit he liked the drink.
This is really good. It's not beer exactly. It tastes like there's Applejack in it.
Old family recipe.
The men closed the double doors and opened a small wall cabinet containing several mugs, each lettered with the Latin phrase, Hic expectimus. The men filled their mugs from a keg, reloading Walt's mug at the same time, and toasted each other.
Hic
Expectimus.
What's that mean?
It just means that we're looking forward to our experiences together. Anyway, let's turn on the game.
The TV came on, but the men largely ignored it. Almost immediately, they began passing comments along to each other under the game noise, as if leery that someone outside the garage would hear them.
Share price is up another 5% this week.
You sure you got the timing right, Bob?
Should we be waiting another 3 weeks? Let's hedge it now and secure our winnings. After all, it's up 130%.
Bob noticed Walt's interested look.
We got word of 2 new applications coming up at an internet company. So did thousands of other people. Which is why the price is so high.
Walt tasted bile in his throat. He'd missed out on a number of investment opportunities throughout the years, and hearing them talk about yet another lost chance made him strangely bitter. The beer seemed to intensify his envy and anger.
Too late for me to get in on it, I suppose. What's the company's name?
Saul silenced the other men with a glance.
Look, Walt, this deal is going to take some time to play out. There are some wrinkles. But we can tell you the company name. It's Intertel. Look it up. Maybe we'll talk about it next week.
By the end of the first game, Walt had downed 4 pints of beer. That, Bob had assured him, was the equal of a Belgian monk's brew. 13% alcohol. From experience, he knew he was on the verge of blacking out. He slurred in his excuses and weaved his way across Philip's yard and back to his house. When Flossie and Jamie saw him, they left for the other rooms. Walt wasn't a happy drunk. Wednesday, Walt spent 2 hours of work time looking into Intertel. The company's share price had exploded upward based on 2 new patented technical innovations, the sales they were expected to produce. Story of my life, he thought. I get to the dance after the good-looking girls have paired off. But despite his bitterness, he burrowed deep into public investment data, deep enough to verify that its bones and muscles were sound. That Sunday, Walt's neighbors provided a lavish man spread: ham, roast beef, spicy sausage and peppers, and sweet potato fries. Walt devoured 2 heaping plates, which helped to soak up the pints of beer he drank. Halfway through his 3rd drink, the men glanced at each other.
Say, Walt, are you still interested in Intertel?
Walt felt that bubble of bitter envy at the back of his throat.
Hey, I'm glad you guys had a good run, but it looks like I'm out in the cold.
Well, maybe not. One of the technical developments they're advertising is a flop. It's going to be public soon. The stock's going to get dumped, and we want to make more money while it flushes. We think we're taking small enough bites that the chance of getting noticed is also small. What we're doing is maybe a tiny bit of insider trading.
I've been known to elide the letter of the law. If it's a closed game, that's okay, but if you've got room for one more, I'd like to play.
The men exchanged smiles. Saul spoke again.
We felt bad after last time. Probably shouldn't have started talking about this while you were here. I just want to make it clear. There's a small but calculated risk of being caught and fined. Worst case, briefly imprisoned.
What's the upside?
At this point in the process, maybe 80% gain, with almost no financial risk.
On how much money?
Oh, we couldn't take any more than $40,000 from you.
He gave it maybe 5 seconds thought.
I'm in. If it's okay with you guys.
All around, the men nodded in approval at him. Bob poured out another full mug for everyone. Walt had no recollection of returning home. His hangover the next day was ferocious, and just to keep going, he took a couple of sips from the vodka bottle he kept in the drawer. 2 hours after arriving at work, just as his raw nerves began stabbing over, Saul called him on his cell phone.
Now listen carefully. No notes, no emails, no tweets. All right? Burn this into your memory.
As the call ended, Walt stared pensively at his monitor. Now where the hell, he asked himself, will I get 40 grand? He knew there was only one possibility. Walt was the corporate custodian for a scholarship fund. A piggy bank only casually and infrequently audited, he could seamlessly remove and replace the funds. The arrangements had to be taken care of over lunch, which left Walt unable to have his usual martinis. By the end of the afternoon, the hangover had segued over into an urgent need for alcohol, and he stopped in a bar before grabbing a train home. The rest of the week crawled by as Walt checked the status of the Intertel fund every few hours. Saturday was worse than the workdays. Dead time with no work to fill it. Walt snapped at Flossie and Jamie until they both found excuses to leave the house. On Sunday, Walt was at the garage doors 10 minutes early. Walt asked twice about taking his profits, but the men were vague about when they would milk the downward crash. Instead, they talked about the cheats and ingrates riddling their families. Walt's only relative was a brother he rarely saw. What the hell, he thought. They'll never meet him.
My brother Charlie's a piece of work as well. He chiseled me out of a lot of the money from the sale of our folks' house, then told me how well we were making out.
It was a lie, of course. His brother, at worst, was guilty of being soberly stodgy. Walt was a bad liar, and the men's smiles were fixed as they listened.
Walt, we have a little ritual that we use to remind us of the secrets we keep.
I don't want to get involved in anything weird.
Oh, not to worry. Bob makes a special wine that we all drink. Yeah, you'll just be drinking with us.
Another old family recipe?
Yep.
Walt thought to himself, they're demented, but they're rich. And if the wine is as good as the beer, maybe I'm missing something.
Okay, I guess.
Bob opened up a bottle of dark red wine and emptied it into 5 mugs.
Say what we tell you, all right? And then drink it all down.
Walt raggedly repeated the words back to them.
Hic expectimus et bene sit agnum?
Agni, Agni, Agni.
After 2 hesitant sips, Walt decided that the wine was both potent and delicious, and downed his mug in quick sips. The other men drank more slowly, but finished their drink a few minutes after Walt, and then sat in silence, staring at him.
Why are you guys eyeing me like that? Is my fly unzipped?
Okay, he's okay. He hasn't puked. We can proceed. Walt, we've got a few arrangements to make in the city tomorrow, so we can get our money out of this deal. It's best if we meet in person. Can you break loose over your lunch hour?
For this kind of money, sure.
There's a parking garage at 345 West 11th, 3rd level, toward 38th Street. There'll be a gray unmarked panel truck.
That seems pretty complicated to just have a conversation.
No security cameras there, you understand. Use the staircase on 38th. It's not monitored. 12:30 sharp.
Okay, I guess.
Walt wanted more wine, but the men switched back to beer. He made his way back home under drunken autopilot and went to bed early. The next morning, he woke up without a hangover. For the first time in at least 2 months. What the hell was in that wine? He wondered. The walk the next day, from his office to the garage, took 15 minutes through noon-crowded streets. Saul and Bob were waiting at the van. As Walt turned to talk to Saul, Bob hit the back of his head with a leather sap. When Walt came to, he was strapped into a heavy chair. Ankles and arms lashed up, the thumb and first 3 fingers of his left hand also tied down, with the little finger separated from the rest of his hand. His head hurt, and he felt drugged. Not drunk, but drug-woozy. In his head, he sensed the first short-circuitings of alcohol withdrawal. The space he was in smelled of damp earth. 2 electric light bulbs suspended by their wires gave off enough light to see roughly dressed stone walls and Phil. Phil was tending to a small charcoal fire. He turned, ignoring Walt, and began sharpening a pair of one-handed branch cutters.
Walt.
Phil? What the hell is going on? What? Cut me loose! If this is some kind of fraternity hazing, it's gone way too far.
Ah, Walter. What the hell indeed. You've just become our test animal. Saul's just upstairs. He asked me to take care of your initial conditioning.
I'm not doing shit for you!
But even as he spoke, Walt felt his bowels begin to loosen in panic. Don't piss yourself, he thought. Don't show your fear. Phil put down the snips and turned to face him.
Don't be any stupider than you have to be, Walt. You see, together, the group of us, we explore dark magic. You might call us a coven. This is the kind of thing where it's damned hard, pun intended, to get things right. Instructions for these rituals are archaic and foreign, and the magicians who wrote them hid their true meaning in codes and riddles. A mistake would damn us before we achieved our rightful status, so that's where you come in. You're going to perform the untested rites for us. If we're wrong about the words or ingredients, you suffer, or die. Maybe the better term for you would be whipping boy.
No way! No way in hell!
What I'm going to do now will save us all a lot of time and argument. I'm going to cut off your little finger, and then cauterize the stump. You'll go into shock, maybe pass out. If, after you come to, you still refuse, we move on to your toes and feet. The combination of traumas may crack you mentally, but that's fine. Just so long as you can still conduct the rituals.
You can't do this!
Well, now you're being stupid again.
Phil picked up the branch cutters, walked over to Walt, and applied them firmly to Walt's little finger, just above the second knuckle. The blades were sharp enough to cut through the skin, and blood began to drip onto the chair arm. Walt thrashed, trying to rock loose, but the chair was massive and bolted into the floor, so his hand remained motionless.
You know, in my experience, you're probably going to scream just a microsecond before the bone is actually snipped. Crazy, huh?
Phil snicked the cutters closed, and the finger dropped onto the dirt floor. He set the cutters down and pulled a cast iron poker out of the fire. With no hesitation, Phil applied the yellow-hot iron to Walt's stump. The stink of charred flesh and curdled blood hit both men at the same time.
Don't be such a baby. It's over for now.
Hey, Phil, I'll take over for a minute. Walt? Walt, can you understand me? It's Saul. Good, you're still conscious. We're going to shackle you with a long chain. You'll be able to eat and defecate and perform the rites we need you to. We're not barbarians. If you survive, we'll cut you loose.
Walt could feel nothing and knew he must be in shock.
Flossie, she'll call the police. They'll come looking for me.
You are 20 feet below ground in a soundproof chamber under the garage. Now, you can scream all you want. You were last seen leaving for lunch in the city and never went back to work. In a few days, someone will think to check on wherever you got the money, and suspicion will mount that you've taken off. Missing persons investigations take years, and by the time they close the case, you'll be long gone, one way or another.
Saul took the poker from Phil and jabbed the stump on Walt's left hand.
You're coming out of shock. Phil, put some beer in a mug with a straw. Let's help Walt take the edge off.
The pain from the amputation and burn seemed to surge through Walt's palm. He desperately wanted to clutch his left hand with his right, but could only wheezingly strain against the ropes. He realized that he had, after all, soiled himself. When Phil offered it, he sucked forcefully on the straw, draining the mug in less than 30 seconds.
Get him another, please. Listen closely, Walt. I had to work very hard to find someone just like you.
Don't kill me! I didn't do anything to you!
Oh, death should be one of your lesser concerns. Paggles, Walt.
Paggles?
It's a memory aid. Pride, anger, greed, gluttony, lust, envy, and sloth. You've demonstrated every single one of them. That's why you didn't puke when you drank the wine. You're evil, Walt. in a bumbling, unconscious way, exactly what we need. We're going to neck shackle you now and leave you for a day. We'll be back tomorrow night with food and alcohol and instructions on how we're going to spend Sunday. If you refuse, we take away your alcohol and remove another appendage or two. The pain and withdrawal agony will be well beyond your ability to endure.
In 20 minutes, Saul and Phil had stripped the sodden clothing off of Walt and shackled him to a long chain. Once they'd left him, he lay naked on the cold dirt floor and began to cry. The pain and discomfort that night were excruciating, but Walt drifted in and out of consciousness. It was worse during what Walt guessed was daytime. His stump throbbed with every heartbeat, and his nerves screamed from alcohol withdrawal. Crawling or pacing helped take his focus away from the pain, but when he was too exhausted to crawl, he lay again on the dirt and writhed. When Saul returned, Walt had fallen asleep and had to be prodded awake. He screamed again as he came to.
Okay, Walt, you're about ready.
Wait. Agni, the sacrificial lamb, doesn't that have to be an innocent?
He hesitated before saying it, the thing he'd realized in the night. He hesitated, but only briefly.
What about Jamie? My son, he's old enough to do what you need. He's still without any real sin, right? Take him instead.
Now that was a touch of true evil. Not the stupid, besotted crap that you're used to. But sorry, the sacrifice of innocence belongs to the other side. No, our lamb has to have the pedestrian available at Walmart evil that you just ooze. If you survive, Walt, you'll do wonderful, terrible things for us. Rights so foul and rank that they have no name. In the end, like all the others, like Bronson, you'll probably beg us for death. Now then, let's begin.
The Initiate, written by Edward Ahern, with performances by Graham Rowat as Walt, Joe Stofko as Saul, Alistair Mackey as Phil, and Tanja Milojevic as the narrator. Investment from the Far, written by Michael Zenke, with performances by Graham Rowat as the narrator. Musical composition is by J.M. Scherf. Episode artwork, web development, and creative direction by Cassie Pertite. Social media and Patreon managements by Brooks Bigley. Videography is by Hale Scherf. Audio engineering and sound design was by me, Jason Wilson. We hope that you have enjoyed yet another bonus episode for you this season. We have plenty more horrors in store for you, I promise. We just want to take a moment to thank all of you. We really could not do this without your support. This show has been such a joy for the team and I to put together. And the fact that we can be here on Season 3, it's just amazing. And it's a testament of you, our patrons. Thank you. We love you. These bonus episodes are really just a small way for us to show you our appreciation. We have more bonus items for you to check out on Patreon soon, so keep an eye out for more private lenses and fun items in the future. That's for now. Thank you again for joining us for this journey and for helping us to get here. Again, don't forget, we are able to do what we do all because of you. Thank you. We are truly grateful and indebted to you, and we hope that you are enjoying the content that we are giving you. So till next time, thanks patrons. We'll see you inside.